a major theme in your work is the value of art to help negotiate and determine identity. I mean, we see it in Dance on the Railroad, Yellowface, Chinglish, I would argue M. Butterfly, and even Kung Fu. That's certainly something Bruce Lee had to deal with. So if I might ask, what is the value of art in helping to negotiate and determine identity?
I think people, a nation, a culture, have often defined themselves in terms of their theater and of their culture, of their cultural products, their artistic products. The artistic products become the means through which a culture, a nation, starts to find a way to create a metaphor for their own identity. And so it's unsurprising to me that you therefore end up with, for instance, culture wars, because culture is not just, it's not just entertainment in many cases. It really is about how it is that we want to perceive ourselves. And so probably because I came of age also in the 70s, and I started doing theater in the 70s, and writing about Asian American characters and themes during a period when it was relatively new, when multiculturalism was, a kind of new and cutting edge idea, and this theory that we should be able to define our own identities and create our own characters and not have it dictated to us by someone else felt pretty exciting. And that's inherently about using art to find a notion of self and a notion of community. So those are really my roots, and I think I therefore end up carrying that into all the work I've done subsequently, and feeling that it's a principle that cultures are organized around.
And how has that changed since you started writing? I mean, I would imagine some of the, I don't want to call them battles for identity, but some of the negotiations have obviously changed since you came of age in the 70s.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, that was what Yellowface was about. Yellowface was about trying to look back on the 30 years of multiculturalism that I'd been involved with, and create a comedy about some of the excesses and some of the absurdities of the growth of multiculturalism from the point of view of someone who also happens to believe that process was and is incredibly valuable and important. So it's easy to make a comedy, a satire about the excesses of multiculturalism if you don't believe in it. But if you believe in it and are still able to kind of laugh at some of the things that are over the top about it, that seemed to me to be a fun experiment. So that's what Yellowface was about. And at the time, I felt, okay, well, that's my statement about having been through 30 years of multiculturalism, and now multiculturalism's not a new idea anymore, and it's not really that exciting, and I'm moving on to kind of internationalism. But man, there are a lot of culture wars going on these days. This has not gone away, and even just the amount of anger that people are throwing at each other over the last 5 days in relation to the cancel Colbert controversy, it's angrier and hotter than it's been since the mid-70s. So this is not over. I thought it was over about 10 years ago, but it's not. It's still, if anything, arouses more passions now than it did, say, 20 years ago.
In the introduction to your first collection, FOB and Other Plays, you wrote, and I'm quoting here, "In attempting to define my place in America, I have evolved through several different phases, and I imagine many more lay ahead of me." So if I might ask, what are the phases you now imagine ahead of you and the generation that you've inspired?
I've got interested in this idea of interculturalism, that when I started out, so much of what we were reacting against as Asian Americans was this notion of being perpetual foreigners. One's forebears can have been in this country for several generations if you're Asian, and people still go, oh, you speak really good English. And so, therefore, we sort of took the position that we were first and foremost Americans, and therefore we really didn't at that point write so much about root culture because we didn't want to reinforce the stereotype that we were foreigners.